Okay, let's begin. I wasn't much interested in history classes in school, were you? Probably not, but when I became a Christian and learned that the true history of the earth is much different than I was taught in school, it somehow became more interesting to study and learn the relatively short history that got us to where we are today. I guess you could say I became an amateur historian of sorts. But I filter everything through a biblical perspective. That's especially important when you consider that the Bible's prophecies about the end have had roughly 6,000 years of history leading us to that end. Therefore, knowing history and understanding what it will all lead to gives a person extra wisdom. History is generally organized chronologically, so I think I'll start at the beginning, which was roughly 6,000 years ago. Whoa, what? Where do you get that crazy idea from? It comes from adding up the genealogies from Adam to Jesus, and empirical science actually supports this crazy idea once you study it. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. I've just started my chronological walk through history, and I bet I've already got people disagreeing with me based on that one sentence. Back in my 20s, I would have scoffed at that sentence too. Mainly because everyone has been taught the Big Bang Theory and Darwin's theory of evolution as if they've both been scientifically proven to be factual. Well, guess what? Both those theories can be scientifically demonstrated to be impossible. I didn't think so either at first, but I listened to the evidence of young Earth creationism and had it proven to me. The question of mankind's origin is probably the most fundamental question ever asked. There's only two possible answers: creator or no creator. Evolutionists ultimately try to explain how mankind's origin can be possible without some kind of supernatural creator. Their theory can't be scientifically proven by way of laboratory experiments. No laboratory is large enough to reproduce another Big Bang. Instead of God creating things by simply speaking them into existence, they dream of another possibility that doesn't require a creator. Then they dig up bones and look at rock layers and dream up ways that the bones and rocks can be fit into their godless dream. Meanwhile, a biblical Christian will look at the same bones and rocks and see how they fit in with the Noah's flood story just fine. What this means is that any evidence in the whole creationism debate is usually subject to presuppositional interpretation. And no, carbon dating doesn't prove anything. If you think it does, you don't understand its science yet. This verse ultimately addresses the creation of time, in the beginning, space, the heaven, and matter, the earth. Time did not exist before the creation. We can't understand this concept as mortal humans, but God exists in an internal state not bound by time. This gives him the ability to know everything all at once. He knows what's going to happen in our future, and there is no other God that has this ability. That's why he's God. All that exists at this point is an empty outer space, if you will, and the planet Earth in the middle of it. Yes, I believe the Earth was created as the center of the universe, but that doesn't mean it's the center of our solar system. Genesis 1:2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. I believe this is describing the earth as being completely covered with water, the deep, and having no continents yet, without form, and completely lifeless, void. Light didn't exist yet. If we could have witnessed this verse visually, everything would just be black still, even though there's a planet right in front of us. I also believe the heaven and earth were smaller than they are today back then, but I don't want to get into that right now. Just keep it in mind for later. I also believe the earth started rotating as God moved upon the face of the waters. Genesis 1, verse 3 through 5. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So now light is created, and we can see the earth looking like a big ball of water. But we can only see the one side of the earth. The other side is dark. So where is the light coming from then? The sun hasn't been created yet. It's emanating from God, who was still upon the face of the waters. This would physically put him on one side of the earth, not completely surrounding it. Jesus will say later in the book of John, "I am the light of the world." As the earth completes its first rotation, we have the first day. Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." These verses are describing the creation of our atmosphere. A firmament is an open expanse of space. God took some of the water and raised it way up to form a huge bubble surrounding the earth. This is generally known as the canopy theory, and we'll see it disappear later when the flood happens. It must have been frozen while it was out there. It filtered out UV light and increased the Earth's air pressure. This explains why people were able to live much longer before the flood. Once the atmosphere was created, God gave it the name heaven, which is now technically another heaven. Our atmosphere is the first heaven, even though it was created second. Outer space is the second heaven, but there is also a third heaven outside of this universe. That's the eternal realm where God exists. Genesis 1, verses 9 and 10. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. The continents are now created, but I actually believe it was one big continent. God sunk some of the land down and lifted some of the land up to form it. I believe it basically covered one side of the earth, while the other side was the Pacific Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean didn't exist yet. This is kind of like the Pangea theory, but not in the same way an evolutionist would teach. Genesis 1, verses 11 through 13. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. Plant life is created. It would make sense that God created mature adult trees with ripe fruit ready to be eaten by Adam and Eve, instead of making them wait for seeds to sprout and grow. Genesis 1, verses 14 through 19. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. This is important to understand. The sun, moon, and stars, i.e. the rest of the universe, weren't created until day 4. How could the plant life created on day 3 survive without the sun unless it was literally just a day later? This is why I don't believe in the idea that each day was actually long periods of time. Genesis 1, verses 20 through 23. And God said, Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. Evolutionists believe birds evolved last. God disagrees. He fills the water with air and life first. I find it fascinating that God specifically mentions the whale here. Darwinists claim whales evolved from land animals that went back into the ocean and lost their legs. They have to say this because they are mammals. Well, God actually created them before the land animals. We will continue with day 6 and the creation of land animals and mankind in the next video. Thanks for watching. The Lord bless thee and keep thee.